Hey, Algebra 2ers. It's day 7 of the trig notes. Super exciting. What we're looking at when it says signs of trig functions, what you've probably noticed is that sometimes when you take the sine of an angle or cosine of an angle, it comes out positive. Sometimes it comes out negative. So what we want to look at for today is, can we figure out, like, when is that going to happen? Is there a general, way to know? And the answer is yes. So when it says consider an angle that intersects the circle, when it says radius r, we're going to make the radius just 1. We'll make it a unit circle. It makes life a little easier. So let's actually change that, and we'll make that a 1 right there. All right. So on the circle, we know that sine is always, opposite over hypotenuse, but opposite over hypotenuse would just be y over 1, or y when it's a unit circle. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse is the same as the x over 1, or just x. And then tangent, opposite over adjacent. So opposite, adjacent, that would be y over x. And then we could play the same game for cosecant, secant, and cotangent. They would just be 1 over y, 1 over x, and x over y. All right. So when it says, in which quadrant is sine greater than 0, less than 0, cosine greater than 0, less than 0, tangent greater than 0, less than 0, what I want to do is I want to go one quadrant at a time. So let's label the quadrants to start. We know upper right, that's quadrant 1, upper left, quadrant 2, bottom left, quadrant 3, bottom right, quadrant 4. What I look at is any point over in quadrant 1 would be positive x, positive y. Like you go over, 1/2 and then up radical 3 or something, what I'll use. So what I want you to do down here is where we're saying, where is sine greater than 0, or where is it positive? Well, in quadrant 1, cosine is also positive in quadrant 1. Tangent is also positive in quadrant 1. All right, now let's look at the angles if it were over here in quadrant 2. So you have to imagine that you draw all the way over, and the point it would intercept, you would have to go left and then up. If I'm going left, that would be a negative x, and then up a positive y. So in that case, since x is the cosine value, that means that cosine would be negative over here in quadrant 2. So under where it says, where is cosine less than 0 or negative, we're going to list quadrant 2. Notice how y is still positive though. So y being positive means that sine is positive there. So we can list quadrant 2 as a place where sine is positive. All right, and then let's consider the last thing. Tangent is y divided by x. Well, if it's y over negative x, that's going to come out negative. So in quadrant 2, tangent would be negative. All right, so now we know what everything's doing in quadrant 1. We know what everything's doing in quadrant 2. And we're going to keep going. So imagine now you have an angle all the way down here in quadrant 3. If I go left and down, that's a negative x and a negative y. So what that tells me immediately, if x and y are both negative, sine and cosine are both negative in quadrant 3. So under where we're saying sine is less than 0 or negative, we can add quadrant 3 to that. Cosine, we can add quadrant 3 to that guy. Think about tangent though. Tangent, you're taking the quotient. So if I do negative y over negative x, I'm actually going to get a positive value. So quadrant 3 will always give me positive values for tangent. All right, last consideration. Wrap all the way around to quadrant 4. Think about what the coordinates of that point would be. You're going to the right, that's a positive x, but you're going down, that's a negative y. So walk your way through them. Sine is the y value, so sine would come out negative. So we're going to say sine is negative in quadrant 4. X is the cosine value, so cosine would be positive. So we're going to list positive 4 as where cosine would be positive. And then finally, positive, that's going to come out negative. So quadrant 4, we're going to notice that tangent is negative there. So if you look at all of them, each of them are positive in 2 quadrants. Each of them are negative in 2 quadrants, but they're all a little bit different. So to try to figure out, like, where are they positive, where are they negative, what I want to do is I want to create one big chart here. All right. So what I mean by that, I'm going to slide my paper on up. And I want you to give yourself one big set of axes here. All right. So quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. All right. What I want to look at is I want to look at in which quadrants are the trig functions positive. All right. So this is where the trig functions are positive. Woo! All right. So start with quadrant 1. If I look, quadrant 1, sine is positive in quadrant 1, cosine is positive in quadrant 1, tangent's positive in quadrant 1. So what I'm going to put there is rather than listing sine, cosine, tangent, I'm just going to list that they're all positive here. So I'm going to put an A here and remind myself that that represents that they're all positive in quadrant 1. All right. In quadrant 2, what's positive in quadrant 2? Well, let's just look across that top row. The only thing that's positive in quadrant 2 is just sine. Not cosine, not tangent. So over here, we're going to put an S to represent that sine is positive. All right, take a look at quadrant 3. Again, just focus on that top row. What's positive? Definitely not sine, not cosine. Here we go, just tangent. So I'm going to put a T for just tangent here. And then the last one, you probably figured it out already, but the only thing positive in quadrant 4 is cosine. So we're going to put a C there to represent cosine. So what this is, some people look at it and see cats, some see cast. I like to write it in the order of the quadrants. So I like to think of it as A, S, T, C. And it represents where the trig functions are positive. So if I go to take any trig function of an angle in quadrant 1, it's always positive. If I go to take any trig angle in quadrant 2, well, sine will come out positive, but anything else is going to come out negative. But keep in mind, if sine comes out positive, the reciprocal cosecant will also come out positive. So that's something we got to think about. All right, but the way to remember it, when I say A, S, T, C, a little mnemonic device is to think of it as all students try cheating. It's mean, I know, and I know you don't all really try to cheat, but it's a fun way to remember it. So all students try cheating. You can come up with your own mnemonic device if you like. Otherwise, that's the one I'm going with. So what we're going to do is on the back, it's almost like a little puzzle. The first ones are going to give us clues, and you have to figure out what quadrant the angle is in. So let's flip it on over and take a look. It says, use the information to determine what quadrant the angle lies in. So what I would like us to do is I want you to draw yourself a set of axes, and then let's practice. Starting in quadrant 1, all, quadrant 2, students, 3, try cheating, or ASTC. All sine, trig, tangent, cosine. All right, here's the deal. You have 2 clues. The 2 clues, you're told that sine is greater than 0, which is code that sine is positive. All right, so which 2 quadrants can we be in if sine is positive? Well, they're all positive in quadrant 1, and just sine is positive in quadrant 2. So that brings me down to needing to be in those 2 quadrants, which means I can eliminate the bottom 2. All right, the second clue, cosine is less than 0 or is negative. Between these 2, since they're all positive here, it can't be in that one. Cosine wouldn't come out negative. So I'm going to get rid of it. Over here is where sine would be positive and cosine would be negative. So my answer is, what quadrant are we in? We are in quadrant 2. All right, let's try the next one. So same thing. Set up a set of axes, A, S, T, C. All students try cheating. It's silly, but say it. It helps. It helps you remember. Don't worry about the variable. Don't let that throw you off. All right, so tangent is less than 0 or negative. So think about, where is tangent negative? Well, I like to think of where's tangent positive and just cross that out. So tangent's positive in the first quadrant. Get rid of that. Tangent's positive down where the T is. Get rid of that. All right, so that leaves us with these 2 quadrants. Now we're saying cosine is positive. All right, well, this is what represents where they're positive. So where I see the C, that's where cosine's positive. So between the two, it's got to be that guy. So it would be in quadrant 4. And please make sure you're using Roman numerals when you're writing the quadrants here. If we do one more of these, we've got C and D. Maybe let's go with D, just because that one's a little bit different. So again, A, S, T, C. All students try cheating. All right. This one I wanted to look at specifically because you're given the reciprocal functions. So they're telling you about cotangent and about cosecant, which neither one of those represents the C on the chart. So I would strongly suggest right beneath it or above it which trig function that goes with. So if cotangent is equal to positive 4/3, what I really need to take away from that is that tangent is going to be positive. It'd be a positive 3/4, but I don't care about that. I just care that tangent will be positive. All right, cosecant, that's the reciprocal of sine. So sine is going to be negative. That's what I care about. It'll be negative 3/5, but again, I just care about the sign of it, the plus or the minus. All right, let's take a look. Tangent is positive. The two quadrants tangent's positive in, the first one and the third one. So get rid of quadrants 2 and 4. Now between them, sine is negative. Well, it can't be quadrant 1 then because everything's positive there. So get rid of that. It's got to be quadrant 3. So that is my answer here. It's saying sine is equal to 1/5, cosine is less than 0. Find the value of tangent. So now we start to use this ASTC idea and take it a step further. So this piece of it is going to tell me which quadrant. So let's start with that. So ASTC. Sine is positive, which means it's got to be in quadrant 1 or 2. Cosine is less than 0 or negative, which means quadrant 1 is out. It has to be in quadrant 2. All right, there's the first thing. But the question doesn't stop there. It says find the value of tangent. But here's the deal. Now I know where to draw this information. Right? So we're going to draw a triangle in quadrant 2. Oops. Label the sides and then evaluate for tangent. Okay, let's do it. So draw your triangle over here in quadrant 2. Since sine of the angle is equal to 1/5, that is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So here's my angle. I'm going to label the opposite side, the 1, the hypotenuse, the 5. All right. You don't have the last side that you need, but you guys know exactly how to find the third side of a right triangle. Here's a little geometry coming back at you. That is just the Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to use a little Pythag to find the third side of the triangle. So if I think here's A, here's B, here's C, I could do a little, x squared plus 1 squared equals 5 squared. Move this right on over, take the square root, simplify it as best you can. This is going to break into radical 4 and radical 6. So 2 radical 6 will be the side length here. I have to remember it's going left. So that's a negative 2 radical 6. And then finally, we can finish the question. Tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. So opposite, adjacent. So it's going to be 1 over negative 2 radical 6. Means we would multiply top and bottom by just the radical 6, because that's the part you want to get out of the denominator, which would give me radical 6 up top. This would give me negative 2 times now a plain old 6, or the answer would come out radical 6 over negative 12.